Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's newest episode of Storytime. So, what do I have for all of you today? Well, I'm glad you want to know, because today we have some stories and encounters from the deep wilderness. Being out in the woods or even in the middle of nowhere offers you a great chance to be away from the busy life at home. But as you're about to hear, it's not always exactly your average cup of tea, which I could actually use right now. Anyways, from an experience with a mountain lion, a camping experience in the Alaskan wilderness, and even a story from a cabin in the deep woods, these are stories I know you're going to enjoy. Remember to make sure to stick around after the last story for some bonus content. I'll see you then, but for now, on with the stories. Story number 1. The Stranger Who Was in Our Cabin. I'm not exactly sure what to think of all of this, but perhaps one of you may have some ideas. But please, I'm looking for some serious ideas only, otherwise I wouldn't be sharing this with all of you. This took place a week ago. So, to begin this story, me and my brother planned a weekend vacation to a cabin our family owned out in the Montana wilderness. It was located at the bottom of a mountain and was next to a series of rivers and lakes. Around us were acres of woods and trees as far as the eye could see. During our stay there would be a series of unexplained things taking place that made us decide to cut our vacation short. First thing we noticed was the overall feeling of being watched. I mean, sure, we're out essentially in the middle of nowhere, but you couldn't shake that feeling off of somebody being in the corner of the room. I remember this happening on the first night we had arrived. I'll quickly describe the cabin. The cabin itself was just your average ordinary home, with 2 bedrooms, a room to shower, a small kitchen, and a living room. My room was located on the far end of the cabin, and my brother's room was towards the front, which had a perfect view of the nearby lake. Anyways, the first night when I went to bed, I ended up waking up at night to what sounded like somebody walking around the living room. I just went back to sleep thinking it was just my brother walking around or something. The thing is, when I mentioned this in the morning during breakfast, he said he had no idea what I was talking about. Moving on. We spent that following day in the woods, taking advantage of the beautiful 70-degree weather. We went into the nearby woods to go exploring, and we went to enjoy the beautiful sights around us. I can still remember the sounds of the birds and small animals roaming around. Once it was around 5 p.m., we returned back to the cabin and take the small boat we had brought with us, and we go to the lake. We were planning on doing some late-night fishing, something we had been planning to do for quite some time. First, we went ahead and ate some food. Then we went on the boat at around 6:30 p.m. At this point, it's already dark. While we were on the boat fishing and talking, I couldn't help but notice there being movement near our cabin. We were quite a bit of a distance away, but I knew I saw the undeniable sight of somebody moving around. I mentioned it to my brother, who had his back turned to the cabin, but when he turns around, he doesn't see anything. Of course, he thinks I was lying, but soon he would also become nervous. I tried to put what I saw behind me, but about 20 minutes later, myself and my brother can see that one of the lights in the living room window had suddenly turned on. Let's get one thing straight here. As far as we knew, all of the cabin doors and windows were locked. Also, we made sure to turn off any appliances and lights before we had left. That included the lamps in the living room. I started thinking about the shadow I'd seen earlier, and from the looks of it, I think my brother was starting to believe me. Still, what options did we have? Do we stay out here on the lake, or do we go to the cabin, only to await somebody waiting for us there? Against any normal thinking, we decided to go to the cabin, disregarding the idea that somebody might be waiting there. As it turned out, the door was locked, and even the window appeared to be closed. I take out the key, and once the door was open, we reveal an empty cabin. Together, me and my brother carefully step into every room, double-checking to make sure nobody had gotten inside, but again, we find nothing. However, I did notice that a couple of things we had with us had been moved to different spots. One example being my backpack. It was now located underneath the bed, even though I had it in the living room. When I looked at my backpack, I noticed that some of my trail mix and granola bars I brought with me were now missing. Also, I did mention that the windows were closed, correct? Well, from where we were on the lake, we couldn't actually see my window, which was located at the very back of the cabin. This time around, we noticed it was opened ever so slightly. Now the idea that somebody getting inside the cabin was becoming a reality, but even so, it was possible I left it open and we tried to forget it. A few hours later, we're able to calm down, thinking that perhaps the light was malfunctioning, and the movement I'd seen outside was just my eyes playing tricks on me. That night, we decided to go to sleep early because we were planning on leaving the next morning at around 7 a.m. Around midnight, I once again am awakened by the sounds of movement, and instead of staying in my room, I decided to message my brother a bunch of times. I wanted to see if he was the one up and about. Minutes went by, and there was no answer. I thought about calling him, but I was concerned that if he didn't have his phone on silent, then if somebody wasn't here, they might hear it and react. I called him anyways, and he ended up answering after 2 phone calls. I guess he only had it on vibrate. Dude, what's the deal? Why did you message me a bunch of times? If you really needed something, couldn't you have just woken me up or something? Come on, will you be serious for once? Don't you hear those sounds? What are you talking about? What sounds? Well, maybe if you would focus, then you could hear the footsteps in the living room. He suddenly went silent, which is when I believe he finally realized there was indeed movement in the living room. Are you sure that's not just you in the living room? Genius, I wouldn't be calling you if I was the one in there. Think for a second. Now that I think about it, I was closer to the living room, so I was more likely to hear the noise. Also, my brother can sleep through a storm and not wake up once. Normally, the smart idea would have been to call for help, but since they wouldn't arrive for at least 30 minutes, I decided to take matters into my own hand, and I step out into the living room. I know, not the smartest idea. Carefully, I open my door a bit, and right away, I'm able to see somebody shuffling around in the living room. I try my best to see what it was, and soon I'm able to notice it looked like a person walking around. Well, with all the courage I had, I yell out, "Get out of our cabin, now!" Surprisingly, that did the trick, because whoever was in there suddenly goes through the window where I can soon hear the footsteps growing distant. This is when my brother finally stepped out of his room, and together we turn the lights on and take a look around. This place was a mess. There was food on the ground, and even what looked to be markings on the wall. Finally, we decided to call a nearby park ranger station, and they actually showed up faster than what we expected. They show up in about 15 minutes, and together we go and take a look outside the cabin. What we are able to see surprises us. The window I mentioned that I saw this person get out of showed signs of a tool being used to open it. The park rangers tell us that they'll keep a lookout, and they recommend we stay put. Yeah, we didn't. We ended up packing our things into our car, and we left less than an hour later. Once we arrived back in town, we mentioned it to my uncle, who owned the cabin, and he told us he'd never heard of anything like that happening. It's safe to say whoever that person was making their way in there at night to take food. Sure, nothing ever did happen to us, but it's the idea of being out in the middle of nowhere and suddenly having somebody show up in your cabin late at night. And if they did have other intentions, what were we to do? Anyways, that's the story. Story number 2. Encounter with the Unknown. Hey there, everyone. So I'm sort of new to this whole thing, so mind you, I'm not exactly the best storyteller. Even so, here is something that happened when me and my girlfriend were camping in the Alabama wilderness. Whether or not you choose to believe me is up to you. But I will tell you this, I'm not the sort of person who's looking to become famous. I just really want to be able to understand this, and I would like to think that what I saw was just somebody innocently walking around. Anyways, with that, let's get started. As I mentioned, me and my girlfriend were out in the Alabama wilderness, and we're planning on staying at an Airbnb cabin that was located right next to a camping site. People often will go here to spend time with their families, as there were a couple of other cabins, but on the day we ended up going, they were unoccupied. Right next to those cabins is a set of woods that go on for miles and miles, and as far as we knew, there were no signs or stories of people that lived out there. Anyways, fast forward to later on that evening. Me and my girlfriend were looking for some firewood to get some food started. As this was happening, we had actually taken the opportunity to walk to a nearby set of fields to take some pictures. Before we realized it, the sky was turning orange and sunset had arrived. Now was the time to start heading back to get our dinner started. 10 minutes into the walk, we can see our cabin up ahead of us, and at the same time, we are reaching a part of the woods where the trees pretty much covered the entire sky. At this point, we take out the small spotlights we had brought with us, and we continue until we reach the cabin. As a quick update, by the time we had reached the cabin, another couple had arrived and were outside next to their campfire. They, of course, were surprised to see us, but I think since they saw our car parked nearby, they figured there were other people out here. Me and my girlfriend are the friendly types of people, so instantly we said hello to them. As they waved back, however, we can see the expression on their faces turn from joy to a look of concern. We now meet up with them, and who I'm guessing was the husband tells us, "Hey, did you guys go walking around with somebody else?" "No, it's just me and my girlfriend Allison." "Why? What's wrong?" He points out into the woods behind us, but all we are able to see were trees. We laugh, thinking he probably just saw our shadows, but he seemed to be serious about it. The thing is, the more we paid attention to details, the more things seemed to appear off. For starters, there was this sudden overwhelming smell. It was like a combination of iron and what you would smell in your trash can. Another thing was we became aware of what sounded like somebody calling out to us. It was distant, but we could still hear it. Finally, we can see movement and what appears to be somebody tall. I'd say about 7 feet tall. I'd never seen anybody that tall, so I was thinking that maybe this person was wearing boots or something, and it appeared to make him look taller. The problem was, we started to realize it didn't really appear to be like a person, at least not like a person I've ever seen before. We could just barely see the colors of gray and brown. Of course, we look at each other confused, but at the same time, with a bit of concern. Just as I was about to shine my light toward it, this person or thing takes off running into the woods, moving their arms up and down, then letting out this sudden sound that sounded like a mix of a person and an animal. I know it doesn't really make sense, but that's sort of how I can describe it. Immediately after that, we each get the smart idea to drive down to the park ranger station, and we tell them about what we experienced. They tell us what we saw was most likely just a person, but still, they told us they would drive around and check their surrounding area. Let's just say they don't find anything, but they do find a bunch of strange-looking footprints and tracks near our cabin. I know there's a lot of legends and stories of people experiencing things out in the wilderness, but I would really love to hope what we experienced had an explanation. Still, unless you're out at night in the woods and have something like this happen to you, then you'll never know what it truly feels like. Story number 3. The Mysterious People in the Woods. Bear in mind that our story remains sort of a mystery. This did happen quite some time ago, and it sort of became a local legend of sorts. Still, allow me to retell this story to the best of my ability. I will say this. If my friend wasn't there with me, then I wouldn't even believe this. But that's why I feel it's best to share this story with you all now. This happened back when I was 18 years old, so about 7 years ago. This happened in a set of woods in Scotland, in case you're wondering. For this story, we will call my buddy of mine Roger. Me and Roger were good friends throughout high school, and we spent many summers either going to the ocean or going to an amusement park. Sure, those adventures were fun and all, but something we had never done was actually go exploring into the woods. You see, for the longest time, we actually thought about going into the woods, but we sort of found it boring. I guess the idea of camping really never crossed our minds. The reason we had planned our next adventure there was because Roger and his family were moving about 8 hours away, and they would only be staying at his home for a couple of more weeks. It was sad to see my friend was moving, but at the same time, it finally gave us the excuse to go into the wilderness. I remember it was the week before Roger and his family would be moving, and I told my mom and dad I wanted to stay over and spend time with my friend. They were fine with it, since after all, I was on summer vacation, so we proceeded to spend time watching movies and playing video games. Finally, the night before we were planning on going out into the woods had arrived, but of course it looked like the weather had different plans. I didn't mention this, but the area we lived in was pretty famous for not having the best weather. 1 hour it could be sunny skies, the next thing you know, it was raining. This night was looking to be one of those evenings. In the distance, we were able to hear the sounds of thunder in the nearby mountains, and now the disappointment that the trails would become muddy started to cross our minds. That of course wasn't going to stop us from going out into the wilderness. Me and Roger come up with the idea of heading out there now, and if it did start to rain, then we would just return. Not exactly the best idea to go out at night in the woods, but Roger reassured me that in the times he's been out there, it's been pretty quiet. So, at around 8 p.m., when both his parents were fast asleep, me and Roger put on some rain jackets, and we grabbed some umbrellas and make our way into the woods. Being the teenagers we were, I remember the sudden rush of feeling happy and excitement, being able to finally go out at night. I'll admit, I did get a bit nervous out there, but since things were pretty calm, I decided to ignore those feelings. Along with us, we'd also brought Roger's 2-year-old German Shepherd. He was so cool, and I remember all the times we would play fetch or go swimming in the lakes. Anyways, we followed a trail that was commonly used by Roger's parents, and eventually we reach an opening at the top of the path. This eventually leads us into a more wooded area, but before we can get any closer, me and my friend stop in our tracks. See, we became aware that Roger's dog started to let out this low growling sound, almost as if he was warning us that he was sensing something. Of course, we were confused about it until we started noticing a light up ahead of us through the trees. We walked a little bit closer, all the meanwhile, Roger's dog kept up with the noise. When we reached this new set of woods, we can see what looked to be a group of people along with a little campfire, which we explained away as the local teenagers out enjoying the night just like us. Now, this is where it gets weird. Since Roger lives in an area that's pretty much in the middle of nowhere, he started telling me how he found it weird to find other people out here. To start, this area was owned by his father, and it was private property. So, unless these people didn't know, they were on his property. Another thing to note was the nearest neighbors were at least a couple of hours of a walk away. Here was the thing about these people. Not once did they ever look over to us, or even acknowledge we were there. All of a sudden, Roger's dog started to bark, and then he started to whine. We could now see as the people suddenly got up with torches, and slowly they started to approach us. Me and my friend stood still as soon we're surrounded by 4 mysterious strangers, seemingly mumbling, sounding like they were chanting something. They don't get too close, but who I'm guessing was the leader tells us, "You shouldn't be out here. If I were you, I would just leave before you're next." Side note, at this point, the dog was still whining and growling at the same time. Let's just say we don't take another second to stay around, and we end up returning back the way we had arrived. As we're getting farther away, me and Roger are starting to think about how weird the entire thing is. You would think that was the end of it, but it wasn't. I remember about a week later, there being a story in the paper of somebody going missing. Instantly we thought about the people we had seen earlier, and we started to think that maybe the stories were related. As far as I know, it remained a mystery, and we never did hear more about it. It's really more concerning than anything because we never truly got an answer. Story number 4. We were camping in the Alaskan wilderness. This is a story that happened to me and my cousin about 2 years ago. To begin, my family is originally from Florida, but for this story, we will be talking about what happened to us in the deep wilderness in Alaska. Now, you might be wondering, why go to Alaska? The reason? My cousin's family is originally from Alaska. It's just that my cousin Emily was visiting us here for summer vacation. I mean, I couldn't really blame her. Who wouldn't want to enjoy sunny skies and spend time by the ocean and water? Well, as July was turning into August, The time of my cousin having to return back home was slowly approaching. Even so, I still wanted to spend some time with her, so she came up with the brilliant idea of me going to visit her for a couple of weeks. How in the world I never thought about that, I am unsure of, but regardless, it was going to be a vacation I would soon never forget. Still, I had to be back before the 21st since I was going to be starting college, but I had a couple of weeks to spend time up there. Once we arrived, I was of course surprised by the huge change. To start off, we had the weather. I was used to temperatures easily around 85 to 90 with humidity, but up here, it was a cool 60 degrees with a nice mountain breeze. Then there was the sunlight, which up until that point, I didn't realize would be out for most of the day, but those are just some minor details. After spending a week up with my cousin exploring the various landmarks and shopping malls, we finally came up with the brilliant idea of going out into the wilderness to do camping. This was my first time camping as I live near the ocean, which isn't exactly the greatest place to stay out. So, with some food and supplies, we get in her dad's minivan and we make an hour drive into some nearby mountains. These mountains were known for their beautiful landscapes, as well as the friendly people who lived in the nearby towns. This was actually where we planned on visiting first before eventually reaching our destination. We eventually reach this unmarked road, which we drive on for about 20 minutes, until we reach an opening in the woods that seemed to be some sort of a camping area. I was right. My cousin tells me that it used to be a fairground for people to go camping at, but it's been closed for some time. She goes on to tell me that there's a lot of bears and wolves that live out here. Wait a minute. Bears and wolves? Then why in the world are we out here? Are you trying to get us on the dinner list or something? My cousin laughed about it and told me that it would be fine. I wasn't exactly happy with it, but to calm my nerves, she told me we would be camping right next to the minivan, so if anything, we can quickly make our escape. Come on now, don't be such a kid. Besides, you got me out here with you. What could possibly go wrong? Let's see. Oh, I know. A lot. Well, with that said, fast forward to later that evening. It's around 10 p.m. and the sun was still out. There were partly cloudy skies and me and my cousin were enjoying s'mores while telling funny stories. I think by this point I'd put all my worries behind me, as I was starting to become comfortable with being out here in the woods. It's now I started to understand why my cousin enjoyed being out here so much. Okay, after we'd eaten our food and told stories, it was now around midnight, and we finally go inside the van to get some sleep. I want to say about an hour later, at around 1 or 1:30 a.m., I'm awakened by the sound of what I think was a car engine. One thing was for sure, it wasn't our car since it was off. I, of course, try not to pay too much attention to it, but the only thing is it's getting closer to us. This was when I opened the curtain on the window slightly to reveal a car parking just a short distance away from our campsite. They parked right behind a set of trees. I mean, if we're in town, it would have been one thing, but it's the idea that we're out here in the middle of nowhere, miles away from anyone, and also the idea that nobody knew we were out here was definitely something else I was thinking about. So, why is it that of all times, someone has to show up around this time? I watched for what seemed like hours as the car sat there with its lights off, until eventually I can see somebody step out. As another thing to add, this old Hummer had no license plate or even any sign showing it was a park ranger or any sort of official. This was when I'm going to my cousin, waking her up and telling her about what was happening. I whispered to her, "Jessica, hey, wake up. Somebody's outside." It takes her about 10 seconds to wake up, but finally she gets up in a grumpy mood. "What is it now? Come on, I told you there's nothing out here. There aren't any bears or wolves, I promise." "It's not an animal I'm talking about, Jessica. There is a Hummer parked right near us, and somebody's walking around." As we're whispering to one another, we can both hear the distinct sound of somebody knocking on the windows and the side of our minivan. This was when I think Jessica realized I wasn't joking, and I can see the calm expression on her face suddenly change to the complete opposite. Suddenly, we hear a voice outside that says, Hey there, can you open the door? I'm lost and I could really use your help. Normally, we would have been fine with just opening the door and talking to him, but something about the situation seemed off. How is it that if he was lost, he just so happened to conveniently find us out here? We both tried to act like nobody was there, but when he started rocking the van back and forth and kicking at it, we finally respond with, "Sorry, but we can't help you. Please, just leave us alone." All the noise suddenly stops, and now we can hear him say, "You want me to stop, do you? Okay, I'll stop." It seemed too good to be true. All went quiet yet again, until we could hear the distinct sound of something hitting the van again. This was then followed by what sounded like air leaking. The more we paid attention to it, the more it sounded like the air was coming out of the tires. We now realized what was going on. This person was purposely letting out the air of the tires and was waiting until they no longer worked. From there, I'm guessing he would wait until the tires were flat, and we would have no other choice but to get out. So, in one quick action, my cousin starts the van and we take off. But that's not before hearing another sound, followed by what sounded like something hitting the side of her van. In case you're wondering why we didn't call for help right there and then, it's because we had no cell phone service. At this point, we're now driving down this lonesome, darkened road, trying to get away from this stranger. All the meanwhile, I keep dialing the local park ranger station, and I'm trying to get through. Just in case you thought it wasn't going to get worse, it does. My cousin points out that she can see headlights in the distance behind us. It started to become obvious he was approaching us, albeit slowly, for whatever reason. Finally, it seems that my call is connected, and I'm trying my best to explain where we were and what was happening. I feel bad for the person on the other end because I was a nervous mess, so understanding what I was saying I could imagine was a challenge in itself. By some miracle, they tell me there are a couple of park rangers in the area, and they tell us they will meet up with us towards the end of the road. The end of the road featured the entrance to the town we were at before. Up ahead, we can see the exit to these woods, and it will look to be another set of headlights awaiting us. It turned out to be the park rangers mentioned just a minute ago. We meet up with them only to see that the Hummer from earlier was nowhere to be found. Thank goodness we arrived when we did, because by this point the tires were pretty much useless. In the end, we had to get my cousin's minivan repaired, but I never did hear if anything else happened since I ended up returning back to Florida a couple of days later. I did try to get an update after it happened, but so far I didn't hear anything. It's been years since it took place, and nothing similar seems to have happened to anyone. Safe to say our encounter was just a one-time deal, but it's still worrisome when you really think about it. Story number 5. The Mountain Lion in the State Park. Yesterday, me and my brother decided to go to the nearby state park to do our normal training for our half marathon. Our run was just a week away, but since we knew we would have to take a break about 3 days before the run, we figured we could go ahead and get some training done now. We head out like normal, only to arrive at a sign that says the trail we normally take is closed. Bummer, considering we had always used this trail to get our training done. However, just because the trail was closed didn't mean we were giving up on getting training in. Just because one trail is closed doesn't mean that we could use another. Man, I really wish we would have just gone to the treadmills on campus. Instantly, we remembered one of the trails that goes off into a set of woods, which up until that point we'd never actually been to before. That was where we began our walk, slowly heading out into the middle of nowhere. The time was 4 p.m., so we still had a fair amount of sunlight left. This was January, so sunset was about 6 p.m. We were only expecting to be out there for about 45 minutes at most. Anyways, as we are continuing down this trail, we are starting to realize just how lonesome it was. So far, it's been about 20 minutes, and we haven't seen anyone whatsoever. The other trail we took always had people walking about and people on bicycles, but this trail, it didn't seem to have anyone. Regardless, we continue on until we reach a crossroads. Here we had the option of choosing 3 separate trails. Again, remember, we had never been to this part of the state park, but we figured this was a great way to get to know the park some more. We take the trail in the middle that looks to go to the top of a small mountain. We figured we could go about halfway, and even see where we had just arrived from. After that, we can return. We reached this halfway point and all is going fairly well, until we reach the part where we enter this trail. This was when me and my brother heard what sounded like an animal. It just sounded like it was a fair distance away from us. We turn around, and guess what we can see? We can see what looks to be some sort of large cat making its way down the trail. We knew right away it was a mountain lion due to the features it had, and also by the growl it let out. As we began to run some more, we could now see it was following us. Great, now what were we going to do? Surely it was faster than us. If there's one thing we were thankful for, is it seemed to have lost interest a minute or so later. I know it may not seem like much of a big deal, but when you think about the recent stories of people's encounters with mountain lions, you can't really blame us for acting the way we did. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for making it to the end of today's video. Glad you could stick around for the bonus content. But first, tell me, what did you think of today's stories? Which one stood out to you the most? And when it comes to the stories that remained unexplained, what are your ideas? Let me know down below. Also, it's time for another question. Let's see here. I know. Have you ever gone camping out in the woods? And if so, what was your experience like? Let me know as well. But with that, my friends, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next episode. But until then, take care, and have yourself a wonderful day. Now, let's get on to the bonus content. Hey there everyone, welcome to the bonus part of the video. So, if you've noticed in my past videos, I've been posting some funny little videos from my pets and animals in the past, so I figured that we'd go ahead and continue doing the same thing. Here's just a couple of more videos for you all. So we start off with our first video. Here we have one of my 4 birds. This is the little one. She's the little sister, and she loves her swing. Sometimes I'll be out for the day and I'll return to just having her swing on the swing for hours at a time. I'm not sure, but she's the only one that likes the swing, and she'll just be on there minding her own business. She's got that face of like, this is my swing. Leave me alone. I just want to swing. Speaking of my pet birds, here's the other one. This is the big brother. For some reason, he likes to go up on the curtains and he'll just stay there for a while. I like to think that this is a secret spot, so this was one time where I was trying to pet him, and he was like, no, leave me alone. What are you doing? This is my spot. Hey, what are you doing? It's funny because I like the little sounds he makes. He sounds like a little dinosaur. It's like, no, stop, leave me alone. Here we have the little brother once again, acting all kind now. He'll have days where he likes to be pet, and then this was just one of them. Like, he's like, yay, I'm being pet, look at me. Here we have little Ruby, happy and excited to see me after a long day of work. Aw, look at her. She's so happy, enjoying the sunlight and enjoying my company. Here we have another time. She was outside on the comforter and I was trying to have it washed. But no, she decided to make it her own bed. Look at her. She's like, no, this is mine now. What are you doing? Leave me alone. But yeah, those are just some funny examples of my pets. If you want to see more of them, then make sure to follow me on my Instagram. I've got a lot more funny videos there that I know you're going to love. But as I mentioned, that's the end of today's video. I'll talk to you all next time. But until then, as I mentioned earlier, take care and have yourself an amazing day.